My stepsister Vanessa always had a talent for making herself the victim in every situation. It didn't matter if she was the one who started the fire. She'd somehow emerge from the ashes, looking like the hero who tried to save everyone. And for 23 years, she got away with it because my father, her biggest enabler, believed every word that came out of her perfectly glossed lips. Our parents married when I was 12 and she was 14. From day one, Vanessa made it clear that she saw me as competition for her mother's new husband's attention and resources. My father owned a successful construction company, and Vanessa's mother had been working as his office manager when they fell in love. It was a textbook romance that turned into a nightmare for me. But this story isn't about childhood rivalry or teenage drama. This is about what happened last year when my grandmother passed away and left me her house. The house, a beautiful craftsman-style home built in 1924. Sitting on 2 acres of prime real estate just outside the city. My grandmother knew exactly what she was doing when she left it to me in her will. She'd seen how Vanessa operated, how she manipulated situations to her advantage, and she wanted to make sure I had something that was undeniably mine. The house needed work. Decades of deferred maintenance meant the kitchen was original to the 1960s. The bathrooms were straight out of the 1970s, and the electrical system was a potential fire hazard. But it was mine, and I had plans. I'd been saving money for years, working as a project manager for a tech company, and I finally had something to invest in. Something that represented my future, my independence, my escape from the family dynamics that had suffocated me for over 2 decades. Vanessa saw it differently. She saw dollar signs. 2 weeks after the funeral, she showed up at my apartment with tears streaming down her face, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing an outfit that screamed, "I'm vulnerable and need comfort." I should have known better, but grief makes you soft, and I missed my grandmother terribly. "I know we've had our differences," she said, settling onto my couch like she belonged there, "but we're sisters, right? And sisters should support each other during hard times." I should have closed the door right then. Instead, I poured us both wine and listened as she talked about how hard it had been watching her mother struggle financially, how she wished she could help her mom more, how grateful she was that I had inherited something so valuable. She never once mentioned wanting the house. She was far too smart for that. The manipulation started slowly. First, it was suggestions. Had I thought about what I'd do with such a big property? Wouldn't it be overwhelming to renovate alone? Did I know how expensive contractors were? Then came the offer, presented as if she'd just thought of it, as if it were the most generous thing she could possibly do. "What if we went in on it together?" she proposed during our 3rd wine-fueled conversation. "You keep ownership, obviously, but I could invest in the renovations. We could turn it into something amazing, maybe even flip it or rent it out. Split the profits. It would be like a family business." I was hesitant, but she was persistent. She brought her boyfriend Derek into the picture, a real estate developer who drew up plans and projections. She introduced me to contractors who gave estimates that seemed reasonable. She made it all feel possible, exciting even. And then she asked for one small thing. "Just add me to the title temporarily," she said, her eyes wide and innocent. "Just while we're doing the renovations. It'll make it easier to get better financing. And it protects both of us if something goes wrong. We're family. You can trust me." I was an idiot, a grieving, trusting idiot who wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, Vanessa had changed. Maybe becoming an adult had matured her. Maybe she genuinely wanted to build something together. I signed the papers she put in front of me. I didn't read them carefully enough. I didn't have my own lawyer review them. I just trusted my stepsister because she cried and called me family and made me feel like we were finally on the same team. 3 months later, I found out what I'd actually signed. It wasn't a temporary addition to the title. It was a transfer of primary ownership to a limited liability company, an LLC that Vanessa had registered in her name. I was listed as a minority stakeholder. The house that my grandmother had left me, the house that was supposed to be my future, was now legally controlled by Vanessa. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. She smiled, that same smile she'd been using since we were kids. The one that said she'd won and I'd lost, and there was nothing I could do about it. "You should have read what you signed," she said, shrugging. "This is business, not personal. The house needed proper management, and you clearly weren't capable of handling it. Derek and I are going to do amazing things with that property. You'll get your share when we sell. Be grateful I'm including you at all." I immediately hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but the most aggressive contract attorney I could find. A woman named Patricia Chin, who had a reputation for eviscerating anyone who tried to commit fraud. She reviewed my documents, and her face told me everything before she even opened her mouth. "This is bad," Patricia said, spreading the papers across her conference table. "Not impossible, but bad. You signed over primary control. The good news is there's an argument for undue influence and misrepresentation. The bad news is proving it will be expensive and time-consuming." She estimated it would take 18 months minimum to resolve through the courts, and the legal fees would run into 6 figures. Even if I won, the house would likely need to be sold to cover the costs. I'd be left with a fraction of what my grandmother intended me to have. Vanessa knew this, of course. When my lawyer sent her lawyer a letter demanding she transfer the property back, her response was a counteroffer so insulting it made me physically sick. She'd graciously buy out my minority stake for $40,000. The house was worth at least $800,000, even in its current condition. My father, predictably, took her side. When I called him crying, desperate for someone in the family to see what she'd done, he sighed like I was being dramatic. "Vanessa explained the whole situation to me," he said in that tone that meant he'd already made up his mind. "She's trying to help you, and you're being ungrateful. You've always been jealous of her business sense. Maybe if you'd paid more attention to the documents you signed, you wouldn't be in this position. This is a good lesson for you about responsibility. A good lesson. My stepsister had essentially stolen my inheritance, and my father thought it was a teaching moment about reading contracts. My stepmother was worse. She called me directly, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. 'Sweetheart, I know you're upset, but Vanessa really is just trying to make the best of a difficult situation. That house was falling apart. Your grandmother, bless her soul, let it deteriorate terribly. Vanessa is investing her own money to fix it up. You should be thanking her, not attacking her. Family should support each other.' Support. The word made me want to scream. Where was their support when I needed it? Where was their outrage at what Vanessa had done? The worst part was watching Vanessa's social media. She posted photos of herself at the property with Derek, talking about their new project and their investment property renovation journey. She never mentioned that it was my inheritance. She never acknowledged that I existed. She was rewriting history in real time, and everyone was buying it. Her friends commented with heart emojis and congratulations. Distant relatives who barely knew the full story praised her entrepreneurial spirit. She was winning, and she knew it. Every post was a knife in my heart, a reminder that she'd taken something precious from me and turned it into content for her Instagram feed. I spent weeks in that dark place where despair turns into obsession. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every waking moment was consumed with thoughts of the house, of my grandmother, of how I'd failed them both. Patricia kept telling me we had options, but every option felt like surrender. Either I'd spend years fighting for scraps, or I'd walk away and let Vanessa win completely. Then Derek made a mistake. A beautiful, perfect mistake that changed everything. Derek posted a video on his YouTube channel. He ran a small channel about real estate investment, maybe 15,000 subscribers, mostly other aspiring developers and house flippers. The video was titled "Stealing Deals from Family Members," a case study, and in it, he laid out exactly what they'd done. He didn't use my name, but he didn't need to. He described the opportunity of finding a family member who'd inherited property, but didn't have the business acumen to maximize its value. He walked through the strategy of building trust, creating an LLC, and using carefully worded documents to secure primary ownership. He called it creative acquisition and bragged about how they'd secured an $800,000 property for minimal investment. The video had been up for 3 days before someone who knew our family saw it and sent it to me. Derek had apparently felt so proud of himself that he couldn't resist sharing his brilliant business move with his audience. He wanted to be seen as clever, as someone who knew how to work the system. I watched it 5 times, my hand shaking more with each viewing. Then I sent it to Patricia. She called me back within an hour, and for the first time since I'd hired her, she sounded excited. This changes everything. This is admission of intent to defraud. This is conspiracy. This isn't just a contract dispute anymore. This is potentially criminal. But here's the thing about the legal system. Even with smoking gun evidence, it moves slowly. Patricia filed for an emergency injunction to prevent them from making any changes to the property or selling it while we pursued the fraud case. The judge granted it, which meant Vanessa and Derek couldn't touch the house for now. But it also meant I couldn't touch it either. The property sat in limbo while lawyers filed motions and countermotions. Vanessa hired a new attorney, one who specialized in making problems disappear for wealthy clients. Derek quietly deleted the YouTube video, but I downloaded it, backed it up in 3 places, and Patricia had already submitted it as evidence. Months crawled by. The house sat empty, deteriorating further. The pipes froze that winter and burst, causing water damage. The roof started leaking. Every day that passed, the property lost value, and Vanessa's lawyer used that as ammunition, claiming the emergency injunction was actually harming the asset. I visited the property one Saturday in early spring, just to see it, to remind myself what I was fighting for. The key still worked. That was one thing they hadn't changed. I walked through the empty rooms, seeing my grandmother in every corner. The window seat where she used to read. The kitchen where she taught me to make pie crust. The backyard where we planted tomatoes every May. And then I saw what Vanessa and Derek had been planning. They'd left blueprints and contractor estimates scattered across the dining room table, probably from before the injunction froze everything. They weren't planning to renovate and flip it. They were planning to tear it down. The entire house. They were going to demolish this 1924 Craftsman and build a modern monstrosity, a 5,000 square foot glass and steel statement piece that would sell for $2 million. They were going to erase my grandmother's house from existence and profit from it. That's when I started planning, because I realized something important. If the house was going to be destroyed anyway, if these legal battles were going to drag on until there was nothing left worth fighting for, then maybe I should be the one to decide what happened to it, on my terms, sending the message I wanted to send. Patricia had mentioned during one of our calls that the injunction prevented alterations, improvements, or sale of the property, but it didn't specifically prohibit the existing minority stakeholder, me, from accessing the property that I still partially owned. It was a gray area, but gray areas were all I had left. I started researching. I learned about demolition, about what could be legally removed from a property, about the difference between demolition and salvage. I discovered that many of the house's features, the built-in cabinets, the original light fixtures, the hand-carved banisters, these weren't technically part of the real property. They were chattels, personal property that could be removed. And I learned how much a sledgehammer costs. Turns out, not very much at all. I chose a Thursday. Vanessa posted on Instagram that she and Derek were taking a long weekend trip to wine country, celebrating despite the temporary legal complications. The house was empty. The neighbors on both sides were at work. I had a rental truck, 3 sledgehammers of different sizes, work gloves, safety goggles, and a plan. I want to be clear about something. I didn't go there to demolish the entire house. That would have been actual destruction of property, and I wasn't trying to go to jail. But I was going to remove every single thing that my grandmother had put her heart into. Every piece of craftsmanship that made this house special before Vanessa could erase it all. I started in the kitchen at 8 a.m. Those 1960s cabinets that Vanessa called dated and worthless. I dismantled them carefully, removing each door, each hinge. The built-in breakfast nook with the original upholstery, I pulled it out piece by piece. The vintage tile backsplash that required the sledgehammer and some precision, but I managed to salvage most of the intact tiles. By 10 a.m., I'd moved to the bathrooms. The pedestal sinks, the clawfoot tub, the hexagonal floor tiles. All of it came out. Some things broke in the process. Some things I had to break to remove. But I was methodical, careful to document everything with my phone. This wasn't vandalism. This was salvage. I was saving pieces of my grandmother's house from being buried in a landfill. The living room was where I really got started with the sledgehammer. The built-in bookshelves that my grandfather had constructed with his own hands, they weren't coming out intact, but I could take them out. The picture rail molding, out. The original light fixtures, the ones my grandmother had cleaned and rewired herself in 1985, I unscrewed every single one. By noon, I was covered in plaster, dust, and sweat, but I was in a rhythm. The sledgehammer felt good in my hands. Every swing was cathartic. Every piece that came down was a piece Vanessa couldn't profit from. The hand-carved banister that ran up the stairs, it took me 45 minutes and a lot of rage, but I got it out. The stained glass window in the landing, I carefully removed it, wrapped it in blankets. The bedrooms went faster. I'd learned the rhythm of the house by then, knew where the supports were, knew what I could remove without risking structural damage. The bedroom my grandmother had slept in for 50 years had built-in wardrobes with leaded glass doors. I took them out. The window seats, the crown molding, the original hardwood flooring in her room, the pieces that weren't ruined by water damage. I pried them up board by board. 3 hours in, I stood in the middle of the house and looked around. It was gutted, not destroyed, not demolished, but stripped of everything that made it special. The bones were still there, the walls and roof and foundation, but every piece of craftsmanship, every detail that made this a home instead of just a structure was gone. Some of it was in the truck. Some of it was in pieces on the floor. All of it was no longer available for Vanessa to exploit. I took photos of everything, wide angles showing the extent of the work, close-ups of the remaining structure, proving I hadn't damaged the fundamental integrity of the building, videos walking through each room, narrating what I'd removed and why. I was building my own documentation, my own narrative. Then I cleaned up. I swept the plaster dust into neat piles. I stacked the broken pieces. I made it clear that this was intentional, controlled, thought out. This wasn't vandalism. This was a statement. I left at 1 p.m., the truck loaded with pieces of my grandmother's house. I drove to a storage unit I'd rented specifically for this purpose and unloaded everything carefully. The intact pieces, the salvageable materials, the fragments of a life and a home that Vanessa had tried to steal. Then I went home, showered, and waited for the storm I knew was coming. Vanessa found out Saturday morning. I know, because that's when my phone started exploding with messages, calls, voicemails, all of them from her, each one more unhinged than the last. She'd driven back from her wine country trip early, probably because a neighbor had mentioned seeing a rental truck at the property. The first voicemail was shock. "What did you do? What the fuck did you do to the house?" The second was rage. "You're insane. You destroyed everything. I'm calling the police. You're going to jail." The third was calculation. "My lawyer is going to bury you. You just committed a felony. You're done." But here's what Vanessa didn't understand. I'd been very, very careful. I hadn't destroyed the house. I'd removed fixtures and features that, legally speaking, I had as much right to remove as she did. The injunction prevented us from altering the property in ways that would affect its sale value. But removing personal property and chattels that could be considered mine, that was a gray area. A very gray area that my lawyer had quietly confirmed I could probably defend. Derek posted a rant on his Instagram, quickly deleted, but not before people screenshot it. He called me a psychotic bitch and claimed I'd vandalized their investment property. The comment section turned on him fast. People who'd seen his YouTube video, the one explaining how they'd scammed a family member, started linking to it in the comments. Even though he deleted the original, other people had re-uploaded it. The internet never forgets. The police did show up at my apartment Sunday afternoon. I let them in calmly, offered them coffee, and showed them my documentation. Every photo, every video, every receipt for the storage unit. I explained that I was preserving family heirlooms and historical fixtures from a property I partially owned, which was facing potential demolition. I showed them Vanessa's blueprints, the ones I'd photographed showing their plan to tear down the entire structure. The officers looked uncomfortable. One of them, an older guy with gray in his beard, looked at my documentation and then at me. "Ma'am, this is a civil matter. This is between you, your family member, and your lawyers. We can't arrest someone for removing fixtures from a property they have an ownership stake in, even a minority stake." Vanessa was apoplectic. She posted a long rant on Facebook about how I destroyed her renovation project and how I was mentally unstable and needed professional help. My father called and yelled for 20 minutes about how I'd embarrassed the family and damaged valuable property. But something interesting started happening. People who'd known my grandmother started commenting on Vanessa's posts. Neighbors from the old house. Former students she'd taught. Friends who remembered the house from holiday parties and summer gatherings. They pointed out that the house had been my inheritance, not Vanessa's project. They shared their own stories of the beautiful details I'd removed, the craftsmanship that was irreplaceable. The narrative started shifting. On a local neighborhood forum, someone posted about what was happening, and the comments were overwhelmingly on my side. People were outraged that someone would try to steal and then demolish a historic house. They called Vanessa out for her attempted fraud. They praised me for salvaging what I could. Patricia called me Monday morning, and she was laughing. "You beautiful, crazy genius." Vanessa's lawyer just called mine. They want to settle. The settlement came together fast. Vanessa and Derek would transfer full ownership of the house back to me. In exchange, I would release them from any fraud claims and agree not to pursue criminal charges based on Derek's YouTube confession. They'd lose every penny they'd invested in legal fees and their LLC setup. I'd get my house back, or what was left of it. My father called it blackmail. Patricia called it justice with leverage. I called it getting back what was always mine. The house was mine again by the end of the month. It was damaged, stripped, and would need significant work to restore. But it was mine. The deed was in my name only. No LLC, no co-ownership, no Vanessa. I stood in the empty shell of my grandmother's house that first day after the settlement cleared and felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Peace. The house was quiet. Sunlight streaming through the windows. Dust motes dancing in the air. All the special pieces I'd removed were safe in storage, waiting for the day when I could afford to restore them properly. Vanessa moved to a different state 3 months later. Her social media presence, once carefully curated to show her perfect life, went dark. Derek's YouTube channel never recovered. He lost thousands of subscribers after his creative acquisition strategy became known. My father and I don't speak anymore. My stepmother sends occasional awkward text messages that I mostly ignore. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the system is too slow to give you justice. Sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands. Carefully, legally, with a sledgehammer and a plan. I didn't destroy Vanessa's dreams. I refused to let her build them on the foundation of my grief. The house sits empty still. I visit it every weekend, sweeping out dust, checking for new damage, making plans. I've started a crowdfunding campaign to restore it properly, and the response has been overwhelming. People love a good underdog story, and apparently my sledgehammer rampage captured the public imagination. One day, that house will be beautiful again. I'll restore the fixtures I saved. I'll rebuild what I had to break. I'll honor my grandmother's memory properly. And every time I walk through those doors, I'll remember that Vanessa thought she'd won. She thought she'd outmaneuvered me, outsmarted me, beaten me at her own game. But 3 hours with a sledgehammer taught her something important. You can't steal someone's inheritance and expect them to go quietly. You can't erase someone's history and think there won't be consequences. And you definitely can't underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The house is mine. The victory is mine. And that sledgehammer, I kept it hanging on the wall of my apartment like a trophy. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is tear down what others tried to build on your pain. Vanessa thought she'd won, but she forgot something crucial I learned from the best. My grandmother taught me that sometimes you have to get your hands dirty to protect what matters. She taught me that family isn't about blood or marriage certificates. It's about who shows up when it counts. And she taught me that a house is just wood and nails and plaster unless it's filled with love and memories and the courage to defend them. So yeah, my stepsister thought she won. Right up until the moment she realized that everything she'd schemed for was lying in pieces on a dusty floor. Right up until she understood that the house she'd wanted to erase and rebuild in her own image would never, ever be hers. The sledgehammer proved her wrong, and so did I.